How's it going, everyone? Today's the day I'm finally getting to take out my all-new State All-Road 4130 custom build that I did. I did a few little teaser videos on this bike, but I never really explained exactly what I was doing. So today I'm going to go through that and I'm going to show you some of the specs and what my plans are for this bike. If you're familiar with the State All-Road bikes, you'll know that they are generally drop bar gravel bikes. They just recently released some flat bar models, but this one I kind of took on a different route. There's always lots of talk that gravel bikes are just retro mountain bikes, and I kind of wanted to prove that point. So what I did was I bought this State All-Road frame. It's a 4130 steel frame, and the fork came with it, and I wanted to use a bunch of parts that I had to build it and turn it into a fully rigid mountain bike. So because I wanted it to feel as close to a mountain bike as possible, I actually got a size large. I usually ride a medium. The reason I did that is because I wanted a longer reach from the seat to the handlebars. Because I wanted it to feel as close to a modern mountain bike as possible, I'm running a very short stem. I believe it is a 40 millimeter. Another thing I really wanted to do on this bike was get an angle headset to slacken out the fork a little bit. Unfortunately, a bunch of the angle headsets are currently out of stock, like a lot of things are. It is a pretty steep head tube. I think it's like 71.5, so it's not ideal for mountain bike, but we'll see how it goes. Another thing I'll mention is, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, I did raw this frame. It was a really nice green limited edition National Parks edition frame, and it was super scary to use paint stripper on, but I think it turned out really good. I'm into the raw look. The wheels on this bike are off of Poseidon Redwood, which is a pretty popular gravel bike, and I had these wheels laying around. They're a little bit wider than State's, and the hubs spin amazing. I can't believe how fast these hubs are. The brand on them is Quanta, which I've never heard of. You probably haven't either, but the engagement on the rear hub is really impressive, and it spins and rolls fantastic. The tires I went with are the WTB Senduros. I actually thought it was Senduro, which would make sense because that's kind of a phrase that you hear in mountain biking once in a while, but it is not Senduro, it is Senduro. They are 47 millimeters wide, 27.5 or 650B. So for the drivetrain, we'll start with the crank. I have a State All-Road crank off my 6061 gravel bike, and then I put a 38 tooth chainring on it. I think this is going to be a little too big for mountain biking, but considering it's a fully rigid and it's a little bit lighter than a mountain bike, we'll see how it handles on the trail. I'm thinking a 34 would be better, but because this is a 110 BCD 5 bolt, it's hard to find smaller sprockets for this. On the back, I have the State Cassette, which is an 11 speed, I believe it's 11 to 42 tooth, with their spring tension derailleur. And then their newly released shifter for flat bar, which is a really nice shifter. It feels a lot like Shimano, and I really, really dig this shifter. For handlebars, I have Raceface Next R at 760 wide. These are actually my old mountain bike handlebars. And then I also have the Raceface turbine stem. Because it's fully rigid, I wanted to get some comfort in the handlebars. I was gonna go with the Wolf Tooth foam grips, but I had these Rev suspension grips laying around. And I don't know if you can see it, but they actually twist a little bit. They have these little O-ring things inside that give it kind of a floating feeling. It's kind of a weird feeling when you ride with them for the first time, but I really like these and I highly suggest them to anybody who gets hand fatigue. The brakes on this bike are really funny. These are Zoom hydraulic brakes. They were $60 off Amazon. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty impressed with how good they are at stopping for 60 bucks. So for a seat, I have the State All-Road Black Label saddle on here. It's light, it's comfortable, and I had it laying around, so now it's on this bike. I just recently put out a video on this dropper post. This is a cableless dropper. It's the Transix jump seat, so it's lever actuated. We're gonna see how this handles on the trail. Unfortunately, the stack height is really high and I can't get the seat as low as I would want, and maxed out is actually too far for me. But we'll see, could be really good. One thing I forgot to mention is this bike weighs 27.5 pounds, which is about a pound and a half more than I was hoping it would weigh. But that's all right because it's riding really good. All right, so I'm already like 5 minutes into this ride and I realize this bike is super fast on flat sections. It's almost cheating. It's crazy how much suspension bob robs you of speed and power. I'm not totally sure about these tires, but at the same time, the only tires that I ride on even XC trails are super wide enduro tires. So maybe it's just a little bit of getting used to right now. All right, so I just finished up about a 7.5 mile bike ride on the state, I'm gonna call it the state no roads 4130. So I'm actually pretty blown away with how good it is. I came into riding this with pretty low expectations because this is much different than what I would normally ride, but it worked really well and it was super fast. The 38 tooth in front actually wasn't as bad as I expected. There were some pretty steep punchy climbs that were testing it, but it did much better than I expected. The derailleur actually kind of did worse than I expected. I don't think the state derailleur is quite up to mountain bike standards, so I would like to see a version 2 of that derailleur come out pretty soon. Another thing is I shrouped the tires pretty good quite a few times, so I'm sure they're very low on PSI and it was getting very sketchy. I think at one point I actually heard some air leaking out of the tires after a rock garden. But no flat, and I'm gonna ride back to the truck. I even hit the jump line on this, which I said I wasn't going to, but I have a hard time passing jumps up, and it jumps better than I expected. I was taking it super easy. It's much different jumping this thing than a full suspension enduro bike, but it took it pretty well. Brakes were phenomenal. The seat, like I mentioned, the seat was, even in the low position, the seat is pretty high, but for cross-country trails it was just fine. I rode everything really good and I'm very happy with this bike. So that's it. That's my state no roads 4130. Pretty jacked on this build now that it's done. I hope you guys liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think of it in the comments. Thanks.